At 6, record NHS waiting lists in England will continue to rise for at least another 2 years. Violet is one of more than 6 million people who've been waiting for routine treatment, many of them in severe pain.
I can't describe the pain, I can't describe the discomfort. I cry every day because I can't do what I want to do.
Now, the Health Secretary Sajid Javid has unveiled ambitious plans to tackle the unprecedented backlog during the pandemic. We will have all the details. Also tonight, bumper profits for the oil giant BP prompt renewed calls for a windfall tax to help households with soaring energy bills. The Northern Ireland Police Watchdog finds evidence of collusive behaviour by police in 11 murders by loyalist paramilitaries in Belfast in the 1990s.
Starter for 10. Starter for 10.
Bamber Gascoigne, the first host of University Challenge, has died at the age of 87.
What you doing? Getting mixed up with her.
And Jane Campion's The Power of the Dog leads the way at the Oscar nominations with Benedict Cumberbatch up for Best Actor.
Coming up in Sports Day later in the hour on the BBC News channel, Team GB are still waiting for their first medal at the Winter Olympics as bronze slips away for the curlers in Beijing.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. The NHS waiting list in England won't start to fall for at least another 2 years, and it could rise significantly before then. The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, admitted the lists would get longer as he unveiled an ambitious new plan to tackle the backlog of people waiting for planned treatment. 6 million people are currently on a waiting list. That's 1 in 9 of England's population. The plan to clear the backlog involves so-called surgical hubs, which will specialise in procedures like hip and knee replacements and cataracts, meaning more people will be treated faster. There'll also be centres in local communities which will offer scans and x-rays for quicker diagnosis. Patients will also be offered more choice in where they have their operations done. Our health editor, Hugh Pym, reports.
This is Violet on the way to the operating theatre for a hip replacement this morning. She's struggled to walk and has been barely able to leave her house.
I can't describe the pain, I can't describe the discomfort. I cry every day because I can't do what I want to do. I sit on, I've got a walker with a seat on it. I have to sit on that to do everything.
Earlier she'd told me what it meant to be having the op at last.
Once it's over, I think I'll be glad. But I can't describe it really. It's just the jitters, I think.
Violet's having her hip done at a dedicated surgical hub, a scheme which is being expanded across England in the new plan. It focuses just on planned operations, dubbed a hospital within a hospital.
The teams are looking at how they work differently to get things like length of stay down. So on this ward you've got physiotherapists working alongside surgeons and nurses to make sure patients aren't having to wait extra days to get home, and that means we can get more people in, get their surgery done and get those waiting lists down.
Certainly compared to the pre-pandemic to now, we have managed to do much more higher levels of activity, make sure that the work that people do, they are doing the work that they're trained to do. So cutting out a lot of bureaucracy that is there.
That and longer hours in operating theatres here mean they've halved the number of patients waiting more than a year for surgery. It's what ministers want to see repeated with the plan announced today.
It will mean waiting lists falling by March 2024, strong action to reduce long waiting times and stretching targets for early diagnosis for cancer care. This vital document shows how we will recover, but not just recover, but also reform.
But Labour argued the government was to blame for the current problems.
This isn't a COVID backlog, it's a Tory backlog. After a decade of Tory mismanagement, the NHS had record waiting lists of 4.5 million before the pandemic.
Hospitals know the number of people waiting for operations. What they don't know is the number on the hidden waiting list. That is, those who at the height of the pandemic didn't come forward, but who have conditions which may yet require surgery. The Institute for Fiscal Studies has projected ahead. The green line shows the waiting list now at 6 million, the blue dotted line what might happen if 30% of the missing patients return, and the orange dotted line if 80% come forward. So there are many unknowns, and one of them is future workforce numbers.
The plan is asking for a 30% increase in activity by 24-25, but there isn't the same increase in staff. So without that, it's not clear how the NHS is going to deliver all that increased activity.
And for some like Rosie, the wait goes on. Following a cancer diagnosis, she had a mastectomy, but since then she's been waiting nearly 2 years for reconstructive surgery.
You just want to get it sorted from a practical perspective, but also you just want to get this episode finished with, draw a line under the cancer, God willing, and move on.
Millions like Rosie want to get their operations done and move on. All the UK's nations have seen rising waiting lists because of COVID postponements. All are now coming up with plans to try to bring them down.
And Hugh is with me now. Looking at the numbers, it's a huge task ahead. Are the government plans achievable?
Well, Sophie, the NHS leadership in England is pleased that there is a plan at last and a real focus on this issue of planned routine surgery. I think there's a sense of being energised now to get on with it, even though there are some stretching targets there. And there's enthusiasm about these specialist diagnostic centres to speed up diagnoses, the specialist surgical hubs that we've been hearing about. There'll be more patient choice, maybe people travelling further, but at least knowing that they'll get their operation done. But there are these unknowns. What happens if there's further COVID pressure? Will that throw things off course, certainly in the short term? What about this hidden waiting list of people who may have quite serious conditions and may start coming forward when they didn't during the pandemic? And what about the future workforce? There's still no detailed plan for the future doctors, nurses and other staff in England. That's all still ahead of us. So, will the money be enough? That's another question. And of course, we have this prospect of waiting lists rising before they come down.
Hugh Pym, thank you. The oil giant BP made £9.5 billion last year, its highest annual profit for 8 years. Shell also reported bumper profits last week. Now, Labour and the Liberal Democrats have renewed their calls for a windfall tax on energy companies, saying the money raised could be used to help people struggling with spiralling bills. But BP says it's investing the profits into alternatives to fossil fuels. Here's our business editor, Simon Jack.
Jenny is one of millions of people struggling with energy bills. On a prepayment meter, she's paying some of the highest prices, which are set to rise even further.
Where £10 could have lasted you 3-4 days, 2 weeks later it can last you 2 days. So you can't, it's difficult to budget because you're like, hang on, I thought I had £15 on there and now I've just checked and I've only got 7 left, surely there should be this. And you're watching the balance go down and you're thinking, there's nothing I can do. When that goes, there's no electric, there's no gas.
While Jenny is strapped for cash, energy companies are now drowning in it, as oil prices have doubled and gas prices have risen 400% since last year. After losing money in 2020, BP made profits of nearly £10 billion last year, its highest for 8 years. Its rival Shell reported bumper profits of £14 billion last week. Meanwhile, consumers are facing record bills, with the amount energy suppliers being allowed to charge rising by over 50% to nearly £2,000 a year from April.
In the 2 years since laying out...
Last November, BP's boss said the company was a cash machine, and today's results amplified calls for a windfall tax.
It is only right and fair that those companies who have done very well out of these spikes in prices are asked to pay a little bit more to help keep bills for everybody else. And that's why I've proposed a 10% surcharge for 1 year on the profits of the North Sea oil and gas companies, and using that money directly to lower bills for everybody else.
The same high prices that have delivered crippling bills to households have seen profits at companies like BP soar. It seems like a no-brainer to try and use one to help offset the other. But according to government officials and industry experts, it's not that simple. Remember, these companies don't do that much business in UK territories anymore. And this crisis has reminded us just how reliant on gas we remain, how difficult the road to net zero will be. We're going to need companies like this and their deep pockets to get there. And we still rely on fossil fuels for most of our energy needs.
They have a certain amount of money to invest. This gives them more money to invest. If you start taking that away, they have less money to invest. And we need them to invest both in low carbon, which BP and Shell and others are doing, and in supplies of oil and gas.
Tonight, the government said a windfall tax would deter investment in the future, risk the security of current supply, and 200,000 jobs that rely on the industry. But with profits from BP and Shell expected to rise again this year, calls for higher taxes will not go away. Simon Jack, BBC News.
The Prime Minister has been reshuffling his cabinet. Boris Johnson promised a rejig in number 10 after pressure over lockdown parties. Well, let's get the latest from our political correspondent Alex Forsyth, who's in Downing Street, and a mini reshuffle, let's say. Tell us the details.
A mini reshuffle that's still ongoing, designed to shore up support for the Prime Minister after the recent turmoil in the party. It was something of a roundabout of ministerial moves. Lots of new jobs, lots of old faces, but some notable appointments. Among them, Jacob Rees-Mogg. Now, he becomes the Minister for Brexit Opportunities. He, of course, has been a long-term supporter of the idea of leaving the European Union and what he sees as the benefits of that. That appointment will please some on the Tory backbenches, though not all. Now, his former job, Leader of the House of Commons, goes to Mark Spencer, the man that was the Chief Whip in charge of party discipline. Already, some Conservative MPs have questioned that appointment because Mark Spencer's being investigated about allegations of Islamophobia, which he denies. Labour says it's an inappropriate appointment. Number 10 says you can't prejudge that current inquiry. Now, his old role, that of Chief Whip, the man who's meant to keep restless Conservative backbenchers in line, goes to Chris Heaton-Harris. He's been a long-term loyal supporter of Boris Johnson, already been working to shore up support in the Commons, and you can bet that's going to be his first and biggest task. But in truth, this was a pretty limited and careful reshuffle because the Prime Minister right now cannot afford to alienate any more of his backbench MPs. Number 10 says they hope it will improve relations with MPs and strengthen the operation here in Downing Street. They hope it will calm discontent, but already one has said it's Brexity and Mail. Another MP said there's not much change here. That discontent certainly hasn't gone away.
Alex, thank you. The Northern Ireland police watchdog has found evidence of collusive behaviour by police in 11 murders by loyalist paramilitaries in Belfast in the 1990s. The inquiry examined the killings of 5 people in a bookmaker's shop and 6 other fatal shootings. The police have apologised to the bereaved families. Here's our Ireland correspondent Emma Vardy.
On a February afternoon in 1992, this was the scene at the Sean Graham Bookmakers in Belfast, minutes after an act of sectarian carnage. Loyalist paramilitaries had burst in and shot dead 5 Catholics.
There was a lot of customers in the shop, most of them dead for cover, but the men still opened fire.
The attack was carried out by the paramilitary group the Ulster Freedom Fighters. Families of the victims have long claimed there was collusion between paramilitaries and security services. Thomas Duffin's father was one of those who'd been killed.
This UFF gang were able to walk in, as casually as you like, murdered 5 people, injured 8, and walk out again and get away with it.
Today, the report by the police ombudsman found it was unacceptable that police had used informants who were involved in crimes including murder.
8 of the agents involved were involved in these murders, paid for by the Special Branch and other agencies they were working for. There was the provision of live weapons to the killers and the provisions of weapons to the killers. This constitutes, for clarity, an irrefutable systemic policy of collusion across our city.
A number of police informants at the time were found to have been involved in the murder or attempted murder of 27 people.
It was police job to make sure that when they engaged with informants that they probed, assessed and questioned what they were doing. And the continued use of informants whom police were aware, or ought to have been aware, were involved in serious criminality and murder is, in my view, unforgivable.
My brother was only 22, an innocent victim. The report still brings up questions that haven't been answered and still need to be answered.
The report also found that records were destroyed and the rifle used in the bookmakers' attack was donated to the Imperial War Museum. Northern Ireland Police Service has offered an apology to families and says procedures have greatly improved over the last 30 years. But no one was ever convicted for what happened here, and now the government wants to end all prosecutions from the Troubles. Today's report joins a number of others with similar findings involving ties between state security forces and paramilitaries. The scale of collusion in Northern Ireland's conflict is slowly becoming clear. Emma Vardy, BBC News, Belfast.
The time is 6:15, our top story this evening. The Health Secretary has unveiled plans to tackle the huge backlog of patients on hospital waiting lists in England as a result of the pandemic. And coming up, Oscar nominations for the British actors Olivia Colman and Judi Dench.
Coming up in Sports Day in the next 15 minutes on the BBC News Channel, West Ham condemn Kurt Zouma's behaviour after a shocking video emerges of their player kicking and hitting his pet cat.
The Duchess of Cornwall has carried out her first public engagement since the Queen expressed her wish that Camilla should become Queen Consort when Prince Charles takes the throne. The Queen's Platinum Jubilee message ended years of controversy over Camilla's future title. She had been blamed by some for the breakdown of Prince Charles's marriage to Diana, but royal watchers say the public mood towards the Duchess has softened. Our royal correspondent Daniela Relf reports.
An arrival fit for a queen. Even a future one. At Roundhill Primary.
Always be behind the desk of one of TV's most challenging quizzes.
Bamber Gascoigne, who has died at the age of 87. The 1920s Western, The Power of the Dog, which stars Benedict Cumberbatch, is dominating the Oscar nominations. The sci-fi film Dune is hot on its heels, and Sir Kenneth Branagh's 1960s drama Belfast is also one of the frontrunners for next month's ceremony. Olivia Colman has been nominated for the Best Actress Oscar for The Lost Daughter. With more, here's our culture editor, Katie Razzle.
It's showtime.
25 years since our first run together. 1900 and nothing.
The Power of the Dog leads the Oscar charge with 12 nominations, including Best Picture. Netflix's 1920s Western, starring a resplendent Benedict Cumberbatch, is best on the big screen. And I've got the best seat in the house with film critic Larushka Ivanzada.
Jane Campion, the director, she has made history today.
That's right, she's the first woman to ever be nominated twice for Best Director.
And her cast have done quite well as well.
That's right, you've got Benedict Cumberbatch, Kirsten Dunst and Jesse Plemons and Cody Smith-McPhee, who I think is the definite for Best Supporting Actor.
Sci-fi epic Dune has picked up 10 nominations. And Steven Spielberg's remake of the musical West Side Story has 7, including Best Picture and Director.
It's the bookies' favourite at 3-1, but I think its best chance for winning is Best Supporting Actress for Ariana DeBose.
You know who you are, don't you?
Yes, Pop. Belfast has 7 nominations, and with the 2 for Best Picture and Best Original Screenplay, its director, Kenneth Branagh, has broken another Oscar record.
7 nominations across 7 different categories throughout his career.
And I think some of the actors have also picked up some nominations.
That's right, Kieran Hines and Judi Dench, who leads the charge of the Brits. Other Brits nominated being Jessie Buckley and Olivia Colman, who play younger and older versions of the same character in The Lost Daughter, which is Maggie Gyllenhaal's searing look at motherhood.
You stop being a writer who waits tables and
Andrew Garfield, who's a top favourite for Tick, Tick, Boom, the musical.
And will he be? I mean, in that category, there are 2 Hollywood greats, aren't there, in that Best Actor category?
That's right, Best Actor very closely fought.
Speak, if you can.
Denzel Washington getting his 10th nomination this year, though it has been 20 years since he won for Training Day.
So what'd you think?
But the big favourite to win Best Actor is Will Smith. He's never won, and he's playing the father of Venus and Serena Williams for King Richard.
And you think he'll win?
He'll win.
And King Richard, the film he's in, is also nominated in the Best Picture category. Are there any surprises there?
I think Drive My Car, which is a 3-hour-long Japanese road movie, all credit to the Oscar voters for getting through that, could be this year's Parasite and upset the apple cart.
But is it the year of Power of the Dog?
I think it's Netflix's Power of the Dog, and this could be the year that Netflix finally wins the Best Picture category.
We'll find out next month. Katie Razzle, BBC News.
Time to find out what the weather has in store. Matt Taylor is here. Hello.
Hi Sophie. The look of nature out there in the spring is on the way at the moment, and the feel of spring for some of you this afternoon across England and Wales. Temperatures widely around 12 to 14 degrees, a bit cooler for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but all will feel chillier by Thursday, even if temperatures only creeping back to where we should be for this stage in February. That cooler air is to the north at the moment, with some pretty strong winds on the northern edge of this weather front. This is the dividing line between the mild air and the cool air. It's sitting tonight across parts of northern England, North Wales, drifting a little bit further southwards into the Midlands with outbreaks of rain. To the south of it, the odd spot of rain, most will be dry. Temperatures not dropping a great deal. The chance of some frost and ice further north, although for most it's going to be a case of showers pushing in and a covering of snow for 1 or 2 in the north and west of Scotland, where the strong winds continue into tomorrow. More sunshine and showers, brightening up after a cloudy start. Northern England, North Wales, the North Midlands, the patchy rain or drizzle clears here, but a cloudier afternoon across some southern counties with some rain at times, and for all feel chilly in that wind too. The milder air just clinging on across southern counties. With that, we'll see some rain through Wednesday night into Thursday before it gradually clears. Showers continue through the night with the risk of some ice around to take us into Thursday morning, a covering of snow again. So it will be a chilly start to Thursday, partly because of the strength of the winds. Quite a wild day to come across northern Scotland. Winds 60, maybe 70 miles an hour for a time. Frequent showers here, Northern Ireland and to parts of northwest England, but elsewhere a brighter day to southern and eastern parts of Thursday with the sunshine out, although it will feel cooler out there, particularly in the wind. Sub-zero feel across the northern half of Scotland. Frost then through Thursday night and into Friday, with the things turning milder and wetter this weekend. Sophie.
Matt, thank you. And that is all from the BBC News at 6. It's goodbye from me on BBC One. We join the BBC's news teams where you are. Goodbye.